So one way to talk about this state of being that we're experiencing when we're in meditation is you could call it don't know mind. Don't know. And the reason it's sometimes called don't know mind is because this is a non-conceptual experience. Knowing is conceptual, right? Knowing occurs in language, in thinking. So don't know mind is non-conceptual. It's just space, empty space. And when you're in meditation and you're experiencing this emptiness, this don't know mind, it's important to allow yourself to recognize that this don't know mind, this empty space, is what you are. In that Sat Chidananda that you've been looking at, the Sat is existence, and the Chit is consciousness, and the Ananda is the bliss, happiness, fulfillment. But the thing about it is that if you really understand Sat Chit Ananda, you understand that all three of them are the same thing. It's easier to identify ourselves as consciousness, and we can recognize that consciousness exists, right? But if you go beyond that, if you go into a non-conceptual understanding of it, it becomes evident that existence itself is what you are. Existence itself. Not just the consciousness that is the existence. The consciousness and the existence are the same thing. This is getting really to the heart of the matter. Because if reality is non-dual, then Sat Chit Ananda doesn't mean three things. It means the same thing. Being recognized as existence, being recognized as consciousness or awareness, and being recognized as the energetic experience of that, which could be called bliss or happiness, fulfillment, like that. Meditation is a state of being that's always there, no matter what you're doing, right? So the conscious awareness that is your true nature is never not there. It's always there. So obviously, if it's always there, it's always possible to be aware of it, to experience it, no matter what you're doing. It's always possible to be aware of it, even when you're thinking. If you're thinking and you're aware that you're thinking, right, you're experiencing your true nature while the thinking is happening, because you're aware that you're thinking. If you're thinking and you're identified with the thinking, right, then you're not aware of your true nature, because you're being the thinker of those thoughts. That's your identity. You're being the thinker of those thoughts, right? But through practice, you can get to a place where thinking is occurring as you're going through your life. Thinking happens, actions happen, emotions happen, situations happen, right? All that activity is happening, right? But the still awareness that you are is never moving. It doesn't move. It doesn't occur in what's happening. It's the source of it, but it doesn't show up there. So you can't understand it or you can't be it like something that you can see and recognize a form that it has, or recognize some sound that it makes, or some characteristic that it has. It's not like that. That's the challenge of it, because we're all oriented to relate to things that we can see, that we can conceive of, that has form, right? So when we practice meditation, we're practicing, and when we're practicing formal meditation, we're practicing letting go of all that and allowing ourselves to experience being, not thinking, not feeling, to let go of all that and experience being. And of course, during the time of the practice, you're going to have flashes of it. It's not going to be constant, right? But even though you're going to have flashes of it, when thinking occurs and you recognize that you're thinking, at the moment you recognize that you're thinking, even though thinking is happening, you're experiencing your natural state, right? Because thinking is happening, but you're aware of it as thinking, right? You're not considering it to be a process that you're doing. You're not thinking. No, thinking is happening and you're aware that thinking is happening, which means the natural state is present. That's mindfulness. The natural state is present. And the practice, the informal practice, is to practice being present all the time. Practice having an awareness of awareness, practice having an awareness of thinking, practice having an awareness of feeling, practice having awareness of physical sensations, so that we can benefit from the state of well-being that allows to occur. So that no matter what's happening, you know, our orientation as thinking human beings, as thinkers, our orientation as thinkers is that whenever anything happens in our world that's disturbing or problematic, right, that requires some kind of solution, right, you got to deal with something, right, our habit is to think about it, right? If you have problems, our habit is to think about the problems, to think about them in terms of what can I do, right? What are the solutions that I can apply to solve these problems? And while you're thinking about it, the nervous system is activated, right? Because you're thinking thoughts about it, you're thinking fearful things about it, you're thinking confusing things about it. It's a disturbing experience to experience this thinking activity that you're doing in order to solve some situation that's occurring in your life or some circumstance in your life. However, if you practice sufficiently, that when that circumstance occurs and you recognize that you're going into a thinking process, and that thinking process is being stirred up by emotions at that time, some emotion, agitation, anger, fear, whatever it is, right? Yeah. As soon as you recognize that there's a possibility of your being aware of all that, rather than being the thinker of those thoughts and the feeler of those sensations and the experiencer of those emotions, as soon as you become aware that you can be the awareness of all that, then you're in a state of being, right? You're in a state of being. When you're in a state of being, you can see instead of just think. You can see what's going on and see possibilities for resolving the issue or whatever it is that you're dealing with. So this is an important thing to understand, because what it means is that the practice as it's meant to be practiced in the activity of your life, right, is to be aware when something happens that you go into this process of trying to figure it out and solve it, right? You go into this upset state, right, where you're like, what should I do, right? What should I do? What's the answer to this? What actions can I take to come out of this problem? See, as soon as you're into thinking activity and you're thinking, what actions can I take to come out of this problem, right? You've identified what's happening as something that shouldn't be happening, called a problem. Huh? Thinking calls what's going on that needs to be dealt with a problem, because the bottom line about it is that it shouldn't be happening. It's disturbing our peace. It's disturbing our functionality. Right? We don't like this. This shouldn't be happening. And so we want to change it. We want to control it. We want to fix it. We want to get it to stop, right? That's a description of so many different things that happen in our lives, right? From little things to big things, right? And so part of the training that we're doing here is training the mind, training ourselves to recognize when the mind goes into this state of stress, when the mind goes into this state of concern, when the mind goes into this upset condition, when the mind starts like going into high gear to figure this thing out, you know? Why? Because I have to produce some kind of a action here. I want the right action. I want to be able to say the right thing. I want to be able to do the right thing so that the problem gets solved and I can go back into a state of relative peace. But if you train yourself, what you're training yourself to do is to recognize when you go into this state, and when you go into this state, to let go of the thought process and just go into emptiness, just go into that state of being, that state of don't know. And then from that state of don't know, look. You know, yesterday I was here and working out, and then I went across the street to the Wawa, and I got what I needed to get, and I was at the counter, and I went to in my pocket, and I realized I didn't have my keys, right? So, you know what that's like. If you're somewhere and you realize you don't have your keys, and you know, which means you can't drive your car now, you know, and everything else that those keys are, you know, open, and you can't do that now. So right away, the emotions go up, like, oh shit, right? And then you go into thinking, okay, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You immediately go into thinking, okay, what should I do? Where should I go? Where could they be? You know, and then you start to look around, you know, frantically looking, you know, oh, I was here, I was there, I was here, I was there. I can't see any keys. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Right? That's the way it goes when you go into upset, right? And you're trying to think it out, trying to think out. Okay, where can they be? I know that I drove the car here, so I had the keys when I got out of the car. So they have to be somewhere between there and where I discovered I don't have the keys, right? So I'm frantically going back, and you know, and you find yourself going back over the same things again and again as if they're going to be there now, which is stupid, right? So it didn't take long before I realized, wait a minute, just wait a minute. And then I just stopped and let myself be still and let the presence of awareness be there with this circumstance. Just let the presence of awareness be there with this circumstance. And then I opened my eyes, I took a few steps, and I looked down and I saw the keys on the floor. Right? So that's what I'm talking about, you know. Life demands that you take action in situations like that, right? I had to do something. I couldn't drive my car, right? But in the middle of all that, to have the blessing of been practicing this stuff enough that you can just stop and go to the breath. It doesn't take long. And it doesn't mean I sit on the floor cross-legged in Wawa. No. I'm just standing there, you know, doing this. It only take a couple minutes until I got present. And when I got present and then I looked, I wasn't looking through the interpretation anymore. See, before I got present and looked, I was looking through the interpretation of what was going on. Oh, it must be here. No, it wasn't there. Well, it might, maybe it's, see, I'm looking through the interpretation at it all. This is very, very important because this is the practice in action. This is the application of what we're practicing when we do the formal practice, right? I mean, you know, to do the formal practice is all well and good, and you can have some very peaceful experiences when you're meditating if you do it consistently over time and you're doing it correctly. You know, but the purpose of the practice of meditation is to Be awake, to be awake. And when does it matter the most to be awake? When you're in circumstances that are threatening or demanding, that need to be resolved. You want to be awake at that time. If you're a race car driver, you want to be awake when you're in the car and it's going 230 miles an hour. In fact, anybody that drives a race car understands that if you're not awake, that car is going to crash. Because when something's moving that fast, right, you can't think what to do. Your thinking is not fast enough to what's happening. Your thinking isn't 230 miles an hour. So if you try and think to drive the car, you're going to have a crash. Right? So people that are able to do something like that have trained their mind to stand down so they can be connected to the car and be one with the car. Right? Then you can do it. Right? So that's an extreme situation. In our everyday lives, the challenges we face are not like driving a race car, right? But the solution to those challenges are the same as driving a race car in terms of you've got to come to stillness, you've got to come to silence, you've got to be awake and see what's really going on. You know, when I say go to emptiness, it's just reset. It's a reset. It's a reboot, right, in the situation. And yeah, of course, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to look where I was, right? But I had done that already and didn't see the keys. I had to have actually looked at the keys and not seen them, right? But when I settled down and got quiet and then looked, then I could see them. This is something that the understanding is important because this is something that you can then actively use, not only when situations arise, right? But you can actively use this don't know mind, this state of being, to sit with things that require your attention, like the fact that you're going to die, right? That requires some attention if you don't want to be terrified, you know, if you don't want to have to avoid thinking about that because it's unconfrontable. Now you take what's unconfrontable when you're sitting in meditation and be with that. Just be with that. It's the solution to, it's the real solution to how to live life in an effective way. That's what we talk about when we say when you're awake, you're more effective, right? But we live in a world that's going to keep triggering states of mind as you go through the day. It's going to keep triggering thought patterns and emotional reactions and everything, right? So the practice is, you know, to practice staying aware of awareness as consistently as possible going through the day, even when nothing else is happening. Why? So you can experience well-being. That's all. You know, one of the things my teacher's been harping on recently, he's saying, look, there's only one possibility for us as human beings in terms of dealing with all the situations and all the circumstances that we face in a human life. There's only one real possibility, and that's to relax. There's nothing you can do. You know, the personality does not like to hear that, right? But it is the truth. It is the way it is. There's nothing you can do. Impermanence is happening here. Everything is coming and going. There's nothing that can be done about it, right? But there is a way to be with it, right, that has it no longer determine the quality of your experience. There's a way of being with it that allows you to be able to relax and be the space of it, to be the context for it, so that things can begin to resolve. You see, I didn't say so that you can resolve things. I said so that things can begin to resolve just by letting it alone, leaving it alone, let it resolve. Everything is happening in accord with the source. Everything is happening in accord with the will of the source. Will of the source is not necessarily a good way to talk about it because it lends itself to the idea that there's some kind of persona that has this will. But it's actually not like that. Thy will be done simply means that the the cause and effect system that's operating reality, right? That's going to determine what's going on, 100%. Not partly, 100%. And if that's the case, the only thing that we can do is relax. You know, my teacher was talking about free will. One of the students asked him a question when he was at the retreat about free will. And he said one story about free will that is an example of what happens is, you know, they cut down logs in areas where they do logging and stuff. They cut down logs and they put them in rivers that carry the log to the mill, right? And then they take the logs out of the river and, you know, turn them into wood, you know, wooden planks and stuff. And so this log is in the river, coming down the river, and the log is like, you know, symbolic of a human being coming down the river, right? The river is life, right? It's coming down the river and it sees an island ahead. And it's like, oh, should I go to the right? Should I go to the left? Should I go to the right? Should I go to the left? I don't know. In the meantime, while it's doing that, right, the current takes it around the island. So can you see all of the should I go to the right and left is just a waste of energy? Because what is happening is going to be carried by the current of the system. It's naive to think that your thoughts about it make a difference. They make no difference at all. So instead of worrying about what's going to happen, which you have no say-so about, you're much better off just practicing being relaxed, right? And allowing yourself to experience the trip. You know, just allow yourself to be with what's occurring. There are many, many stories in Buddhism about this, in terms of things happening, and the awake person, no matter what happens, says, oh, that's all they ever say. Oh. You know, they don't react to it, they just acknowledge, okay, that's what's happening now. I like that. See if you can keep aware of the fact that when you're practicing meditation, it is so easy, right? That's the hard part. You know, it's so easy that it's hard to stop trying to do it and just allow yourself to notice that it's already happening. A meditation is always already happening. The question is, are you aware that it's already happening? In other words, are you aware of the awareness that's never not here? It's always here. Right? And when you're under pressure, when you're under stress, when you're in a situation that's challenging, that's the most important time to notice it. That's the most important time to be awake. You know, when you're dealing with the circumstances that are inevitable in a human life. You know, when you're facing illness, when you're facing accidents, when you're facing financial difficulties, when you're facing problems in your relationship. You know, all of those things are the things that people try and think their way out of or think their way into in terms of a solution. But since you're practicing meditation, you have another alternative. You have something else available. See if you can train yourself to notice that when you're in that state, if you just stop for a few moments and just let yourself notice the empty awareness that is always here, and let yourself reset as that, and then look. And if you succeed in resetting and then look, you'll see it differently when you open your eyes. You'll see if you're in conflict with people that you love, if you go into the empty space of awareness and orient yourself there and then look at the situation and the person, you'll be seeing it differently. And because you're seeing it differently, the way you will behave will come from a direct connection to reality instead of what you're thinking about it. And you'll see that that's a lot more workable. Life gets easier.